Hello, we're back again, and I'm really looking forward to having a good conversation. This lady here, Edel, she's well known on Facebook. She's well known in the Irish circles, and she is one of a kind, to say the least. The first thing I'm going to do is give her a little bit of a chance to talk about the effort that she's been making for the last 3 years with Up Eire, which is really a fantastic group of people. They have been concentrating and focusing on the COVID lockdowns, etc. So, Adele, can you give us a little background and maybe tell us a little bit more about the people that's involved in that and the fact that you have basically devoted the last 3 to 4 years of your lives for this subject matter here, which obviously is extremely important.
Hi, good morning, Declan, and thank you so much for having me on this morning. And hi to everybody that's out there listening, and Merry Christmas to you all, of course, from Ireland, a troubled Ireland at the moment, but still an island and still a good place to be. Look, as we know, during the lockdown 2019, when a global pandemic was basically pulled upon the people, and people truly believed that this was the biggest event ever that was going to, people were told they were going to drop in the streets, that all life as we knew it was going to come to a standstill, and indeed it did. And our own Taoiseach, our own president, in America you would call it, stood in our parliament and said, look, at the people, we're going to have to really sacrifice everything for 2 weeks. There was going to be 2 weeks where we were going to flatten that curve, with the rise in COVID. We had to all make sacrifices. This was a war. And within 2 weeks, that curve was going to be nicely flattened, and we'd all get back to normal. And 2024, we're still in it. So, as people know, I'm sure all over the world, the same things. Local businesses, small businesses were closed down immediately. Large corporations like the Costa Coffees, I'm allowed to say that, and all the other big conglomerates were allowed to stay open, and nobody questioned it because it was very, very important that everybody just did what they were told and stay in their house. And those 2 weeks went into months, Declan, like everywhere else. And people weren't really asking any questions. And RTE, our national broadcasters, were telling us how we had to comply with everything that was foisted upon us. And most people went they were very, very diligent about their shopping, wiping all their groceries down, doing all the things they were meant to do. Nursing homes had closed down, and they haven't closed down. The residents had to stay inside, but nobody was allowed to visit. No hospital visits. Nearly curfews on people, basically, because we were all just going to flatten this curve, Of course, the months went on.
It was very interesting to watch that being rolled out. It was really an exercise in psychological warfare, really, because before it really hit and the restrictions were brought in, before anything happened, before anybody got sick, before anybody died, we were inundated with videos of people just falling over in the streets with spasms, which were obviously epileptic fits or some types of seizures. And that really put a scare into people. It was very, very interesting to watch out. So people were primed, of course, to react with great caution, to say the least. And perhaps they fell for a little bit of a ruse. Would you reckon that to be the case in Ireland?
Well, I think with most Irish people, they're fairly diligent in, looking out for each other, looking out for their granny, looking out for their mammy, the Irish mammy, and the whole lot. So and of course the media, and it's only now, Declan, in 2024 that I realise the stronghold that the Irish media have on the Irish people. I didn't realise it at the time because I never particularly watched RTE, our national broadcaster. Never particularly watched it. I watched English television if I watched any television. So it came as a massive shock that people were like in lockstep. They were doing exactly the little boundaries on the supermarket floors. You could only walk so far and no further. And every Irish person was doing exactly what they were told. The introduction, of course, of the masks, every Irish person possessed a whole box full of masks. Now, I was working in the healthcare sector at that time. I was a healthcare worker, and I wasn't overly concerned for myself because I couldn't see any evidence of what they were saying. But within a couple of weeks, and I did sort of ish I believed there was something, and that, yeah, it probably would be wise maybe to just be a little bit more cautious. But as the weeks went on, what I was seeing on RTE and local media stations, what I was seeing there had absolutely no correlation with what I was seeing in the healthcare service. Absolutely none at all, Declan. And then that for me was the time most things started to twig with me. And I did bring it to higher up management in the health service. And I was just told to just follow the orders, basically, do what you're told and don't be questioning anything. It wasn't our role. We were doing a good job, so it wasn't our role to question anything. Well, that was never going to happen.
So the man at the top gave the order and people were to just obey it. And the regular people then, of course, did not question it in the least, because why should they? Because they are of the belief that these people are out for their betterment and their good health, which is only natural as human beings would be.
Well, it's basically, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. So nobody questioned it, and huge trust placed in the Irish media, because you see they were coming into people's homes every day, these so-called celebrity journalists, reporters, presenters. I'm using all those terms lightly, and they were bringing the people the news. So Irish people in the main had absolutely no reason to question them, and should anybody question anything, they were sort of locked down in the sense of just being hushed. Now, don't be saying that. That's not a good thing to be saying. Now, remember your granny is vulnerable, blah, blah, blah. So I suppose what happened really for me was then, I'll just move on a little bit. What happened for me really, once I started to question things, there was no going back. Once the elephant in the room is mentioned, there's no going back, and the genie is then out of the bottle. So I questioned an awful lot of things, and I thought I was the only one questioning it, because I come from a town where everybody seemed, as I said, the word lockstep keeps coming to my mind. And people were doing exactly what they were told to do. All the shops had closed down. Public transport was cordoned off like a crime scene. The first morning I got on the bus to go to work, it was cordoned off like a crime scene, with the yellow stickery things everywhere, and you could only sit at the front of the bus, not the back of the bus. And Garda, our police, were getting on buses to check that people had their masks on correctly. And I can only liken it to, I would imagine, what it was like in Nazi Germany when people were checked for their papers, etc. So I sort of thought, how is this happening? And they continued on in the media every day. Now they were calling out the death figures, not survival figures, of course. And like you say, we were seeing the images from China, people falling down dead in the street, allegedly. The same from Italy. We were shown those huge, massive coffins piled high. And that's what we were told. Lots of older people in Italy were all dying. Everybody was dying, basically. This is what was happening. Bring out your dead, But I still couldn't see any signs of it. In fact, people, to be honest, we had good weather here in Ireland, which is very unusual. And people were actually out enjoying doing their garden and doing home projects, basically. So nobody seemed overly concerned about it. Anyway, as time went on, it was starting to take its toll, because schools were closed. People were getting more and more isolated, and of course, even if they were asking any questions, they were even more socially isolated, because now you're a pariah because you dare to ask any questions. So there was a demonstration rally, whatever people want to call it, in Dublin, and I decided to go up, risk taking the bus, big step, like to go 30 kilometres, and I met up with other people who were asking the same questions as me. And I discovered that there were many people nationally were asking the same or similar questions. And from there, I met a group of people who were called, I think they were Hold the Line. They were just a group of individuals, and they were calling themselves Hold the Line. And basically what they were doing were stepping out publicly and asking these questions. And from there, I met a couple of people involved in that. And that proceeded into people renaming themselves then Wake Up Our City, which in turn ended up being Wake Up Eire, which incorporated the whole country. And as the time went on, and as we know, the Pfizer product and the AstraZeneca product was then introduced, more questions were being asked, because anybody that had worked in, and you didn't even have to work in medical care to know that an awful lot of the information was coming out was completely the opposite of what you had been told. I wasn't a nurse or anything, but I did distribute medication for people, etc. And there was no mention of contraindications. So basically, you had these people coming on TV, these great scientists like Luke O'Neill, saying, no, it doesn't matter. You can take the AstraZeneca, you can take the Pfizer, you can take the Johnson & Johnson. You can mix them all up, a bit like mix and match sweets. I don't know if they have them candy in America. And I started to listen, well, that's not what we learned with the health service. You have to be very, very careful of contraindications, because if you take one medication, it can have terrible side effects if you're mixing it with another. And, it really just, everything I was hearing at that stage made absolutely no sense to me. And then the government introduced where all the small businesses had to close down. But I think it was if you spent €12, you could buy a meal in a pub and then you could sit there for the evening. That €12 was going to save you, So the whole thing, I mean, when we look back, Declan, it sounds ludicrous now. And I know future generations are not going to believe it, but this was the scenario in Ireland, and I'm sure globally, but we seem to take the extra mile. And people actually believed, or did they, that €12 was going to make a massive difference. And the virus didn't go into any of the big coffee houses, but the virus would have went into Little Mary's cafe down the road. So she had to close that cafe, and people have never actually recovered from that financial losses of small businesses. So, we in Ireland then were hit with so many things, because we had the introduction of that product. We also had the introduction then of the digital currency. People were talking about the digital currencies, digital passports. So your passport was going to be connected then to your vaccine status. So we had a massive uptake. I can't actually remember the percentage now, but we were told, and with the figures told us in our papers and on our media, that the majority of Irish people had taken up that product. And not only had they taken up that product, but they had gone back for a second and a third product.
So looking back 3, 4, almost 5 years after it now,
Yeah,
we have learned that the death rate in 2020 was actually slightly lower than the death rate in 2019. So
well,
this plague that was to kill millions, according to some people actually believe it did kill millions.
yeah.
The figure for the total death toll was more or less the same as average. And now, of course, it has begun to increase. But that all remains to be seen. But it's a fantastic group anyway, and this group is called Wake Up Ireland. And they are still trying to inform people, or has that issue now been put to the background somewhat till maybe next time?
It's Wake Up Eire, Declan, and really, it's a group of people. They're, as you say, they're completely volunteers. They're people from all walks of life. I think, there's retired teachers, retired nurses that have spoken out, whistleblowers, healthcare workers. So they come from a broad spectrum of people. And basically, what we saw our task was, it's non-political group, but we saw our task was really informing the public, because people were getting into the thing of exchanging videos all day long, and podcasts have, a great role to play, but we needed to get down with the people basically and try and inform the people. It was never our data. It was never our information. We took it off government websites. We took it from Pfizer's own product website, etc. And we funded it ourselves with very meager funds, and eventually people did come, even if they couldn't come out onto the streets with us, they did at least maybe sponsor a couple of hundred flyers, etc. And the idea was, Declan, no matter whatever was going on, we were there. We were up to speed with what was going on, and we've printed our flyers out. We stand on the streets, basically. That's what we do. All weathers. We stand on the streets and we hand out leaflets, which might sound very ineffective to people, but actually I believe it's been one of the most effective strategies so far. And what we've done is, I think we've 500,000 flyers or something out at this stage. And again, it's been on all sorts of subjects. Like I said, the digital currency, the 5G, the products, the Pfizer products, of course, our referendum trying to remove women from our constitution, which was a hugely nefarious agenda. And when we actually got onto the streets, most people had a good concept. Most volunteers had a fair, because it was quite, some bits of it was difficult to understand. We never claimed to be legally trained, but most people had a good grasp of where that nefarious agenda was going. And I think that was quite a successful campaign for us. And it was a bit like a social experiment, because we got to judge where Irish society was at.
Would it be correct to say that as regards those two referenda, that people just had a good feeling that there was something amiss with this entire situation, and they just voted against it for that reason?
There was lots of different people with different concepts. We talked to a lot. We went to farming communities, and farming communities had a different perspective, because you know what it's like in Ireland with farms. They most certainly don't want farms split up into other families and other extended relationships, etc. So from the farmer's point of view, and I'm only giving the feedback, they most certainly were always going to vote no. Then we talked to a lot of young parents, and of course the mothers, were valued by their partners, by their parents. And of course, mothers, Irish mammies play a very strong role in Irish society. And they were always going to, the younger parents, we had really positive feedback from them in the sense that, no, we're not going to devalue our role. The most shocking I found was probably women like myself of middle age. They weren't willing. They were going with the whole media narrative that it was very important that we were all inclusive, that there was X amount of genders and we must include everybody. But what they weren't understanding was all sorts of families, blended families, were already secured under our constitution. This was going to take away from families, not give to families. And another more really nefarious agenda was carers, and one parent families were lied to, and they were told that they were going to be excluded if this referenda didn't come in, which was complete and utter false information. And we had certain party representatives actually hosting nights, information nights, so-called information nights, and blatantly lying to people that are carers and one-parent families. And, when I questioned them on it, and the question time, I was actually asked to leave because I had the statistics. They were saying that 1 million families, if they didn't vote yes, were going to be left out of this new Ireland. And that was completely and utter lies, and there was no basis for their numbers. So, Declan, as you can imagine, as your listeners can imagine, huge amount of stuff was being thrown at Irish people in the last 3 years. And I know it has been everywhere else, but don't forget, we are an island of, 5 million people. Well, we've more now. But it just, and Irish people were not used to having to deal with all these things at one time. And they weren't used to having to question the media. That was the main thing. They weren't used to that. So as far as Up Eire was concerned, we got our leaflets out. We also print up boards, but very strong. Our messages got stronger as we went along. Very straight to the point messages. We stand at roundabouts, we stand at shopping centres, initially we took an awful lot of abuse from people to do with the Pfizer product, but because people wanted to go for it, we talked to people who had gone for 2, 3, 4, and we weren't there to judge them. We were just there to ask because they wanted to talk to us. And you would ask them, well, when did you not feel well? And they'd say, well, after the first one. And then you might say, and you went for 3 more. Yeah. So you have to have some level of diplomacy there, because as I said, we weren't there and we're not there to judge people. And we stood at the Pfizer building for 18 months, which is in Ringsend in Dublin. And we stood there and we handed out information for 18 months at Pfizer.
You did a fantastic job despite all the government propaganda and the untold millions of euros probably spent in all the TV stations, all the regional stations, radio stations. It doesn't even compare to David Goliath. This was some serious effort indeed. Moving on to the next, now that of course was billions of euros involved in that.
Yes.
Moving on to the next big money-making scheme. And even before that, we'll have a little nod and a recognition of the green energy, which now seems to be coming towards the end of its foolishness. That too will be put to the wayside, but not before untold billions of dollars and euros have been spent all over the world. The result, of course, of this free energy is, needless to say, the most expensive electricity in the history of the universe in Ireland. And that is the result of the free energy. After all, the wind is free. Well, it is. The wind is free, all right, but nothing else is free, that's for sure. The big issue, of course, now today is migration, immigration, and this mentality is that for some magical reason, Irish people are supposed to actually pay for absolutely everybody. Now we're coming up to Christmas, and I'm sure there's many people in dire need. Santa has to make his appearance. People are stressed out. There is the highest level of deaths by despair ever. We had a Cork lady, Vanessa Callahan, brutally killed down in Cork. She was a homeless person. There is reports from last night or the night before that there was a homeless Irish person that was, died from exposure really out in the cold in Dublin City. There are people going out with their video cameras and they're taking pictures of Irish homeless sleeping under cardboard boxes, etc. But nonetheless, the best of hotels for everybody else. Is this crazy, or what has transformed the Irish mentality to such an extent that they willfully just ignore what they don't want to see and just glorify the dream? It's crazy.
Well, Declan, I like you have asked this question, and I've spent endless nights thinking, how did we get here? How did Irish people get to this level of not wanting to know, of ostrich syndrome? And if we look back at our own history, and then when we got some level of wealth, I suppose, we were encouraged, we were encouraged to help the poor. And we were told, because, we were gaslit the whole time, because look at our history and look at all the people that didn't help us, we should be helping. We should be helping. And I'm of the generation that remembers the little box on the table that you gave your money, gave teacher the money, and teacher put the money into a box to help Africa. But we weren't told that Africa was a massive wealthy continent. No, that was engendered in us, that we must help the less fortunate. And as children, we were indoctrinated into that, and nobody is saying that we shouldn't be a generous. We are a generous nation. And we are also virtual signalers. Don't forget that. We like to be seen to be doing good. And that's the combination, and that could be a lethal combination, and I believe that's what's happened. Our guilt, being gaslit, and virtual signalling has led us to want to be seen. When the Ukrainian war first occurred, whatever people's feeling is on that, most Irish people that had their flag hung Ukrainian flags instead and took down their own Irish flag and put up a Ukrainian flag. Now, people might find that really hard to believe. If they had a profile on Facebook, they took down their own profile and put up the Ukrainian flag.
Well,
Make
when it
sense
comes
of
to
that.
when it comes to geopolitics, miracles happen all the time. We have in the last few days seen a fellow that had a $10 million bounty on his head. He was a head chopper. He was a bad guy. The United States hoped to get this guy next cruise missile. It's for him. He's the worst of the worst. 10 days later, he is now the president of Syria, and he is the best thing since fried bread. That is what happened. In Ukraine, which we discussed, Ukraine actually was the center of the far right in Europe. That is where the neo-Nazi movement was at its strongest. That is where the skinhead movement and was at its base. Anybody that aspired to be with Nazis' aspirations, that was their mecca. Then all of a sudden it changed. All that history was just expunged. And now, of course, it was Slava Ukrainia. It was an amazing thing to see. You ask anybody when the war began, they'll say February 22nd, 2022. Well, that war has been going on a long time, and a lot of people have been killed before that, but that is their starting point.
100%.
Anyway,
and if you told Irish people what you've just said now, when I told Irish people that, and I'm no expert on Ukrainian war, but I knew the basics. And when you told Irish people that, they just put up a tinfoil hat symbol if you were on Facebook, or there was again a hush. It was a bit like the scamdemic. You weren't to be mentioning things like that because people were baking cookies for them. These people who, in their own way have been trafficked as well. We know this. And every stop was pulled out to take these people. Nursing homes, people were moved around in nursing homes, elderly people, so that young men could be put into these nursing homes. Communities were broken up. Children from the Ukraine were given priority in preschool, Montessori school, and in local small national schools, compared to Irish children who maybe then didn't get a place. But then what was really, very telling was that suddenly people were starting to make videos and things of people getting off the boats and getting off the planes, but they weren't Ukrainian and they were all men. And this started to filter out. But of course, then if you mentioned any of that, you were far right. And local newspapers, I stood for local elections and for the council, and anybody that was standing was given this huge accolade, about how wonderful they were, even though some of them were actually under investigation for various things. And I just got, what they wrote about me was Edel, Gillick, anti-immigration. That's it. They could have said I was a parent. They could have said I had been a preschool teacher. They could have said I'd worked in disability care. No, that's what they wrote. So again, Irish people terrified that somebody might call them a name, terrified Mrs. down the road Mary and Johnny might talk about them. So best not, keep your head down. And this, I believe, what's happened. And it's only now when we're being plantated, there's no such word, I'm sorry, when the plantation is occurring in every town and in every village, when they're starting to see little bits and pieces where the guards are sending in, riot squads basically into small villages against women and children. And even that, RTE, of course, does not show that. Our national broadcast is not going to show that. But they're starting to see snippets. And now I believe Irish people are, in general, are like rabbits in headlights. They don't know what to do now because it's out of control. With 15,000 homeless Irish people, that's only the government figures, so I don't believe that. 4,000 of those are Irish children, and yet the Irish people are content to sit back knowing that their own children are out on the street. Some of them are availing of the services of, you know, food and shelter on O'Connell Street in Dublin from volunteers. Not our government is doing absolutely nothing about it. And Irish people are still not able to find it in their hearts to stand up and say, this is enough. They just don't seem to be able to do it. There's marvellous people doing marvellous stuff. But even, you know, I won't call it a rally the other day in Athlone. Yes, a good few people showed up, but again, the majority of people just watched from their cars, heads down, terrified in case anyone might see them taking an interest in what's going on. And thousands of men are coming to that location, and thousands of men are being distributed all around the country. And Irish people are still afraid to be called a naughty name, you know, or a bad name.
Well, you have hit the nail on the head. The population seem to be coward. That is COWERED, not COWARD.
Yeah, yeah,
They are just too timid to put their head up and say, I've had enough of this.
yeah,
I'm just worried about Irish people.
yeah.
To heck with those fellows. They're not our problem. They shouldn't be here. They should be 1,000 miles away. They should be a long way away. Just a person, well, Syria's in the news. It's a sad case. But before this, Syrians coming. Well, they have got to go a long way till they end up in Mayo. That's all I got to say. And there's plenty of places for them to stay. They could have stayed in any number of places. If people really wanted to house these people, if it's for legitimate reasons, well, they would build a camp in the Curragh or in some place in Yugoslavia or Romania or wherever, and they would house 50 people till their condition improved at home. They would not be putting 100 into Kilshima and 100 into Knock and 100 into Ballina and 1,000 into Athlone, and okay, Cork is a bigger place, we better put 3,000. They seem to be strategically located all over the country to be within easy access when they will get an order to move out of that camp. Now, people just do not want to see this, what is quite obvious to anybody that knows any little bit of history whatsoever, that these are being located in the focal points in Ireland. And that is a nasty nut to crack and to chew on, but that's just the way it is. Where do we go from here? The election was a disappointment, I guess. The Nationalists, with maybe one or two exceptions, were at about 2.5% or whatever. Do you think these elections were honest? And do you think, is there any future in the electoral process at all, bearing in mind that the next election, 5 years from now, well, things ain't going to be only many times worse 5 years from now?
Well, first of all, I don't believe that Ireland has 5 years. I truly, in my heart of hearts, yes. I don't believe Ireland has 5 years. I don't even know if it's got 5 months with the pressure points at the moment, with our own homeless, with our own children emigrating, educated here emigrating, and then the influx of all these new people, mainly men. We don't have an infrastructure that's suitable. You're absolutely correct. It's a strategic plan. I'm not somebody that understands all all this military operation things, but even I can see the strategy behind this is very, very deliberate. We don't have health facilities. We don't have that. We just have so little, and I cannot get the Irish people to really wake up to what's happening. And now I believe they're so scared. Now that they do know, they don't know what to do about it. In answer to your question, I absolutely do not believe the elections were fair. I absolutely do not. How can you bus lots of people who have only come into the country and suddenly they're allowed vote? There's reports of dead people being issued with cards. Family members were actually dead, and still, who was using those cards? People were not asked, again, this has been reported, people were not asked for a proper identification. I had to present my own identification when I went to vote. It was all very lackluster whether I presented my passport or not. It was all very, very lackluster. And then lots of different anomalies were reported within the voting system. So I don't believe, even on those grounds, I don't believe it was fair. And what would give the people the right to vote in our elections to determine our future when they haven't been in the country 5 minutes? So I believe a big failure, Declan, to be honest, I think a big failure was we didn't have, on a Wake Up Eire point of view, we did our absolute best, but we didn't have the volunteers to get out there and get information out to the people. I would have envisaged a time where we would have thousands of volunteers. We travel around the country. It's expensive. Nobody has much money to go from town to town, from village to village. But I had envisaged if we had had thousands of volunteers to get out there with the information about what was really happening in our country, I believe we may have had a different result. I can't remember who it was that said, it wasn't good anyway, who said to win the hearts and the minds of the people. Was it Bush? No, it wasn't. Whoever. And we really needed to win the hearts and the minds of the Middle Ireland. Middle Ireland, believe it or not, I believe this. Middle-aged Irish women from Middle Ireland are one of the biggest threats to this country. And you'll probably have a load of people. I say it all the time, and I make no apology for saying it, because Middle Ireland, middle-aged women, we found from out on the streets, are the most entrenched in the narrative of, I'm all right, everything is all right, please don't rock my world. And they're so used to now, they'd be the 80s generation, and they're so used to now exporting their children to foreign countries. It's no big deal to them. It doesn't seem to be any big deal that their children have no future here. It seems the norm, and they'll be planning the trip out to Canada or wherever to visit. And I just truly believe if we had had thousands of people out on the streets 24/7, we may have, and that's not a grandiose idea for Wake Up Eire. I'm just talking about in general. The people, if they get out on the streets, if they knocked on their neighbour's door, people don't want to do it and say, my own community has changed. Even within a year, I hardly recognise my own street with the building work that's going on. And I've asked the council, who are you building all the houses for? Irish people are having 1.1, let's say 2 children. Thousands of houses have been built in my own area. Who's the houses for? No answer. No answer. So I just believe we have to get the information out to Middle Ireland. They are our threat. I'm sorry to say it, but they are. The working class people of East Wall, Dublin, they got it. They understood within a couple of months, I believe. And the credit to those, particularly the women at the time, that got out onto the streets. They were phenomenal. They were, and they got it. The Middle Ireland, they're not getting it.
That is an interesting point. The people in Coolock and Darndale and those places, they just understood immediately what this game plan was, because that has always been their existence, really. They understand that the world is not an easy place.
Yeah.
You are speaking of a large percentage of people that have grown comfortable in their idyllic surroundings, and they do not want anything at all to interfere with that scenario. But they, of course, are living completely in a dream. They are living on borrowed time, to say the least, because the economic situation is, as soon as this free money runs out, it's all over for those people.
Yeah.
The entire economy of Ireland is based on just 6 American multinational companies that could pack up tomorrow. Even if they decide not to pack up tomorrow, there is bigger things happening in technology. Artificial intelligence are going to replace practically everybody. We've got a man in this country called Elon Musk. He is a study of amazement, that fellow. His wealth has doubled in the last few months since his friend Donald Trump has won the election or whatever. But anyway, artificial intelligence is going to replace a huge, something like 75% of all jobs available. Even those Gardaí that are out there in Athlone, some would say using some heavy tactics against a 65-year-old lady, as you saw. Those people are going to be replaced, but maybe they understand it, but they don't want to understand it. So that means they're going to do nothing about it. They will just go along.
Yeah.
And that people that you speak of, those comfortable middle class, they are the ones that will never change till they're actually forced to change. Then it's going to be too late. What do you think should be done going forward? Should people try to break away and form their own little communities? There's a lady down there in Kerry, and Shakti, whatever, that you know that lady. You probably see her on Facebook.
Yeah, I do.
I
Yeah,
spoke to her
yeah.
on Messenger. You know the lady I'm talking about.
Yes, I do. Yes.
She, I guess, has a magnificent following, and needless to say, she's been shadow banned and whatnot. But she's sort of a prophet in her own way. She is advocating that people need to just set up their own little micro communities. Is that just the only option left? To just separate from this country that's basically in dire straits, even though they do not seem to realize it yet?
I respect, I respect people are absolutely trying to build their own little communities, go to local farmers, go to local growers of things, buy locally. Who wouldn't respect that? Who doesn't support that? But it's not my own personal take on it. This is our country.
Yes.
We and past generations, whatever is in this country, our past generations, and we have worked for it. And I don't believe we should just walk away from it. Absolutely not. I'm all for homeschooling, but at the same time, every parent is not in a position to homeschool. So I believe the parents take back the schools. They're your schools. As we say, they're your streets. They're your towns. They're your villages. You take them back. And the way you take them back, first of all, I believe that Irish people, even though they come across as being very confident, are actually seriously lacking in self-respect and self-worth. Because if you really valued yourself, you would not allow somebody to come in and take everything that you own and say, here, have more. So we've got to build on the Irish psyche and understand, first of all, where Irish people are coming from. And we probably don't have time to, do that big major study on Irish people's psyche. A lot of it, of course, as well, Irish people are so used to, going off to the pub, going off to the GAA matches and forget about it. And I believe education, informing the public. That's the only way that I can see. It's not the only way, but to me, it's a major way of going forward. When people understand what's really happening to them. Yes, they'll be frightened first, because suddenly it's like when we understood about this pandemic, suddenly it's like, oh my God, it's like a bucket of water has been thrown over you. But when you get over that shock of that, then you start making plans for yourself. So absolutely, yes, make your communities, but stop disempowering yourself. Take your power back, parents. Take your power back in the schools. When your children are being taught this horrific agenda that's going on to destroy young minds, parents think they're helpless in that. They're not helpless. Get up to the schools and demand and hold the teachers personally responsible, because they are personally responsible for your child's safety. They are not the parent. You're the parent. So I believe very important to work with younger parents. Very, very important. And I wish people would take that mantle on. Older parents, maybe, that have the life experience. I remember, and I'm sure you do too, where if there was an argument over a football, that's Johnny's football, no, that's Mary's football, there'd be a melee. All the parents would be in together to sort that one out. And suddenly your child is being taught this stuff that shouldn't even be on a top shelf magazine, and you're going, oh, I don't know what to do about that. How do we get that across to parents? And I believe education is the only way. Small groups in your communities. Grandparents. Where's all the grandparents? Why are they not taking on and distributing the knowledge that they know? Where are they? I don't understand. Our whole society, the whole fabric of our society is breaking down at the moment. Every single structure is breaking down. And so what has to happen, we're going to have to rebuild it. That's going to take a long time, and I understand that's not going to solve the plantation problem at the moment. The other problem, of course, is that they're going to introduce homes for all. This is going to be a new bill now, homes for all. And of course, Irish people, again, are going to, hopefully not, but will fall for the trap of, oh God, yeah, everybody should have a home. And this is going to be their downfall. And I believe this is where it's going to hit Middle Ireland. Because homes for all, guess who the homes are for? And suddenly they've already tried a few strategies to encourage older people to give up their home or to take guests into their homes. These so-called guests. And once these guests, now the guests can't come from the Irish community. The guests have to come from other racial communities, but they're not come from Irish communities. And then you get a small grant. But when you really look at this grant, it's not a grant at all. And it's going to get older people into debt. And when they can't pay it back, their homes will be confiscated. And these guests will be living upstairs with total control of the house. And this is where it's going to hit Middle Ireland. So in answer to your question, how do we get that information out to Middle Ireland? We need the volunteers. We need the people on the streets to tell them. Like, we're not prophets. It's not rocket science. When you look at, we have a brilliant researcher here, a woman parent called Noreen O'Shea. And Noreen does fantastic work in the research department. You know, there's a couple of people here I believe should be running the country. Not running the country, enabling everyone else to run their own lives. And Noreen will be one of them. Her research is second to none. And Noreen posts every day the government's plans. You know, she's able to see in advance, because my eyes just grow tedious and tiresome from looking at all this small print. They make sure it's nice and small. But their plan, their 2030 plan is well on the way. Well on the way, and further on in. And Simon Coveney, I mean, people forget, he said Ireland will be a nation of 10 million people. That's the plan. So this is where it's going to hit Middle Ireland, because they're homes for all, of course. Great idea. And they know how to present it to Irish people in that way. Oh, don't be so selfish that you want a home to yourself. It must be homes for all. You know, it's a great plan. If you were that side of the fence, you would think it's an amazing plan how they've managed to roll out. None better. You know, it's a major plan, and most certainly Ireland has been hit from all sides.
Most people know absolutely nothing about Agenda 2030 or the Rio Pact of 1992 or any of those things at all. Can you just synopsize for persons that would not know anything about Agenda 30? What is the basic plan here? Okay, you say Simon Coveney, he's going to have 10 million people. Well, 2 million of them will be Irish and 8 million will be from someplace else. Why is it the belief that it would be an advantage for Ireland to have doubled the population that it presently has? For example, I see people in Galway saying, oh my God, it takes me an hour to drive from Merview across to Salt Hill. What'll I do? With double that amount of people, why is it an advantage to have double the amount of people, even if they were Irish?
Well, you see, from a rational person's point of view, which you are, and I'm sure the people listening, there's no advantage at all. We're being brainwashed into thinking that it's great advantage because it's diversity and people are coming to work and it's going to add to our economy, but there's not one scrap of evidence. Most people that are coming here are seeking asylum or refugees are throwing away their documents for a start. So they're unvetted, they're undocumented. So we don't know their past history. We don't know what their qualifications are. You know, are they a doctor? They say they're a doctor. Are they a doctor? Would their qualifications be of the Irish standard? There's absolute, really the bottom line is, and we keep saying it now, is you'll own nothing and you'll be happy, which, this is the rhetoric now. But of course, when you own nothing, you're not going to be happy, particularly Irish people. They are not going to be happy. It's just such a grandiose, malevolent plan. They're not connecting the dots. It's too much. It appears to be too much for them to take in. That's really the bottom line. You won't own your own home. You'll have extended your credit so much that they'll give you a piece of paper saying it's money, and then they'll take your house. You won't own your land. The farmers will have to do so much green. All this, another scamdemic, of course, that they'll end up, small farmers will give up. Because I know some small farmers, they're already on the verge of giving up because they can't make ends meet anymore. And all the different tariffs and things that are being now placed on them, it just doesn't make any sense for them to continue. And really what the government will give you is pretend money in the digital currency, of course, and they'll take back real assets. And that's the bit this society does not seem to be able to get their head around, because after all, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. And unless we break that, we are thinking we're going to sink. And just on making your own small communities, yes, absolutely, 100%. But when the major part of the boat is sinking, I truly believe one little bit of the boat is not going to save the whole ship. I believe as a nation now we are all going to have to step up and do our bit. And I can think in numerous ways, but one way to me is like with Up Eire, get the word out to the people. Get the word out to them. And how do you do that?
I was watching a video clip. A person was interviewing John Waters the other night, and he was asked, why are these people believing such codology? And what was the explanation of it?
Yeah.
And for once, John Waters was stymied and he was flummoxed. And the best he could come up with, really, that in essence he was saying that they're in some sort of a trance, they're hypnotized. Otherwise, there's absolutely no rational explanation for it whatsoever. So I was watching that video, and then I saw another video of Councillor Quinlan there. He was at a council meeting or whatever. He wished to get a figure for the number of foreign nationals in public housing in Fingal County Council or whatever. So he brought in a motion to try to get that figure. Somebody decided, he's against this, but we want to discuss it because we want to be looking fair. And the next thing, we had a litany of fools, one after the other. Not since I've seen the Muppet Show 40 years ago have I seen such a crowd. Everyone rushing in to make sure that they were on video saying this guy is far right, he's crazy, he's a Nazi, etc. And that is, as you discussed earlier, a perfect example of the virtue signaling right there. You also mentioned about Grant, etc. It reminded me of the slogan back in the 1500s or whatever, Queen Elizabeth I, surrender and regrant. It is a common enough trick that's played down in history. Just give up, you'll get back everything, but from now on, you're going to be subject of mine, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And you also, to summarize the hour that I have enjoyed here, it seems that the Irish people, you mentioned that they need to elevate their self-worth.
Yes.
So I would say that it seems to be part of the Irish psyche to suffer from an inferiority complex, in a sense. And that has to be rectified. Now, I've interviewed other people and they says, well, do this, do that, the other. But we certainly know where you stand. You are going to put up a serious fight.
Well, I and others.
Yes, you and others. Well,
Yes.
I'm talking to you for the moment. Yes, well,
Yeah.
I would greatly encourage you to do so. Now, it was a pleasure and I really enjoyed this. What we must do is we must give a platform for anybody that wants to present their views and try to get people working together. Um, I see the nationalist movement in Ireland. There is factions,
Yeah.
groups, even in one constituency in Dublin, won't even name which one it was, you had three nationalists and they were not on the best of terms, we'll put it like that.
Yeah.
Infighting, etc. Too many chiefs, not enough Indians.
I agree.
So the only solution to that is to actually have no chief whatsoever. Everybody be an Indian, and that is the way to go. Now, I'll give you the parting word, and this won't be the last time we talk, but I do want to get as many people on together here, and more importantly, to get these people on one sort of, any sort of a platform where they can have a chat or whatever, interact, encourage one another or whatever. There's a lot of people making great sense, but they're all individual voices. We've got one fellow up there in Donegal, he's fantastic, but he's just an individual. You've got another lady down in Kerry, she's fantastic as well, but she's only one individual as well. All those people will just have to take one for the team now.
Yeah.
And that's the bottom line. Just to cooperate and just go with the flow. And that is my view on it anyway. But anyway, I'm going to give you the last word
Thank you.
and
Well,
we'll call
look,
it a day.
I completely concur with what you're saying very quickly is we at Wake Up Eire, we don't mind being the Indians because the Indians is where it's at because that's on the street. That's with the people. That's where we hear the feedback. That's how we know what's going on in the country is from talking to people and people that think it's not effective. What we would say is, we had people queuing up, couldn't wait to get in, taking their children to get a product. And from there, we hardly have anybody attending these things. It's right down so much of the government to keep trying to sell it, get 2 for 1, etc. I believe we've had a major impact by being Indians. I truly believe we've had a major impact, and what we need to do now is get more Indians out on the street and give the people the information. What they do with that information, but most certainly during the referendum and most certainly with the product, I truly believe the figures are there. There's no uptake. Watch the Facebook comments. Some days I go on just for a laugh because the comments 2 years ago are completely different to the comments now. There's a lot of words and a lot of words that couldn't possibly be said, here that people are now using to do with that particular product. So yes, it has been very slow, but the groundswell is there and we have to pull together because this ship is rapidly sinking. I want to leave on a positive note. And what I would say is, yeah, Irish people, they need to man up. They need to woman up now. They've been children for long enough. Mammy now can't be running around after them. And they really need to get their confidence back in themselves. Take themselves back, first of all. Take their families back. Take their children back. The schools don't own your children. The government don't own your children. Take your school back. Take your community back. Take your wisdom back. And take the Irishness that's in you, take it back and take your country back. And there's many people out there that are absolutely willing to do it. They just need some kind of direction. And yeah, the egos will have to go. So I'm saying that now, and I'm saying it to all the groups in Ireland. We at Wake Up Eire, we get on with most people and we distribute other people's work as well. That's most important to say. We've fantastic content creators there in Barry and Katrina and Kathy, but we also distribute other people's work as well, other groups' work also. And it's time now to pull together in this one, or we may all get in the lifeboats. Simple as that. So look, I just want to wish everybody a Merry, Merry Christmas as well. We have to have a little bit of cheer too, and we do a lot of stuff tongue in cheek and have a laugh with it as well. Even the most horrific things, we have a laugh. And that's what we're here for. And thank you so much for having me on as well. My dog has decided my time is up. Sorry.
Well, hopefully not. Well, thank you very much. And another reason for optimism, of course, is that the leader of the opposition, such as Simon and Micheál,
Oh, yeah.
they're not exactly the sharpest knives in the drawer either. So that is another reason for optimism right there. All right, Edel, thank you very much. And you have a good day for yourself. And we hope to get good news from Kerry as soon as possible.
We'll talk
All
about
right,
that.
thank
And
you
I
very
sing
much.
God bless everybody and a Merry, Merry Christmas from Ireland to everybody abroad. God bless you. Take care.
Merry Christmas to everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.